Chicago has a brand new mayor after the nightmare of Lori Lightfoot. Did they just step into another nightmare? Well, we'll tell you. Far-left Democrat Brandon Johnson narrowly defeated moderate Paul Vallas in the runoff election to replace Lori Lightfoot. Johnson is a former union organizer who won while calling for new taxes, more social programs, and expanding sanctuary city policies. He did downplay a little bit of defund police, but it's his game. His plan to take on Chicago's crime crisis, fund more social workers instead of cops. So he'll just put it that way. Newsweek wrote this: Brandon Johnson's Chicago election win is the police's worst nightmare. Guy, did they just go farther left?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so when Lori Lightfoot lost and didn't advance to the runoff, there was a lot of celebration. And look, she was a bad mayor who deserved to be shown the door. But I warned that day, I said, let's not pop any champagne yet because it could get worse. If Brandon Johnson wins, it could get worse. Bernie Sanders came in for him, Al Sharpton came in for him, Randy Weingarten came in for him, all agreeing, let's go Brandon, and he won. The people of Chicago looked at what was happening in their city and said...
I did not catch that.
Yeah.
That's very funny.
I caught it immediately and loved it.
Oh, my goodness. Let's go, Brandon.
Just slid it in there. But look, this guy is bought and paid for by the teachers union in Chicago, one of the worst unions in the country. He defended every single school closure, which were worse than most places in the city of Chicago. He defended the teachers union when they went on strike shortly after they finally got back into school. He was a defund the police guy. The electorate knew all of this. Paul Vallas was kind of like a milquetoast, moderate Democrat type guy, relatively low turnout election, and the hard left won. They are on the march right now. Republicans, conservatives, they need to understand the left is on the march.
Yep.
They are winning elections.
Yes.
It's not even just their moderates. And conservatives need to figure out what it takes to win. I know there's a lot of stuff out there that we're talking about, but we need to get serious.
Yeah. Will Cain and I got deep into this last hour because he said, you know, what's happening is people are trying to guess what those people in harm's way really want. We have no idea what they really want. They are still in harm's way today with that crime crisis, but they chose something that could conceivably make it so much worse.
And it could potentially get worse. Paul Vallas, he was the one endorsed by the police union, and there was a warning issued by John Cateranza. He's the police union's president. He warned that up to 1,000 officers could leave the department if Johnson won.
That's a disaster.
He said this to the New York Times: if this guy gets in, we're going to see an exodus like we've never seen before. So you might see police leave in droves after this. I just want to double down on exactly what Guy said about the left being on the march, because while we were all talking about a Trump indictment, look, it's important, it's historic. Of course, we have to talk about it and should talk about it. But while we were doing that yesterday, Chicago went more left, and we lost the ideological balance on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, which has repercussions beyond social issues for elections far and wide there in Wisconsin, national implications.
Yeah, I mean, it is, if you will, the crime of politics right now, not getting a lot of talk, and that is one side power grabbing from the other. I mean, it is the nature of politics, but this could be more permanent than what some on the right even believe. All right, we're going to stick with Chicago, but we're going to go here. Many of that city's residents are furious with the development of the new Obama Presidential Center. It's costing the city a staggering $500 million, and leaving many of them worried that it will send rents and housing prices higher, much higher. One Chicago resident, an activist, telling the Washington Post this, quote, "This is the community that sent him to the White House, and we should be the community that gets to stay and benefit from the presidential center." Emily, what's your take?
Right, you know, that was the founder of Not Me, We there, who talked about specifically the potential for displacement of thousands of Black families. And that was in response, in part, to the former president who said, it feels natural for Michelle and me to want to give back to Chicago and the South Side. The Obama Presidential Center is our way of repaying some of what this amazing city has given us, to which the response is, by what, displacing everyone? When you talk about property increase and that values, all that does is displace people that can't afford to stay there, that there is overwhelmingly African American. And I note that the now new mayor-elect Johnson of Chicago went to a community meeting there, and he talked specifically, he said, talk to me, what are your fears, what are your worries? And everyone there said that we can't afford this rising rent, and that we'll have to move from neighborhoods that we've lived here for over 40 years. And as he was talking, he said, you know, we have to make sure for these families that with this economic development taking place, that landlords don't see it as an opportunity to push out families who've been part of these communities for decades since, and then one of the residents there, Mrs. Williams, said, since before the libraries come. So I think at the end of the day, it's summed up by what she said, which is, you know, the Obama Center, it's not being built for Chicago, it's being built for the world, and the world doesn't want us here.
So
That's
how
they feel.
naive am I, Morgan, not to think that private money should be much more involved in this endeavor? And why isn't it, if you're talking about a city that's seen so many woes, so much crime, so many problems? I mean, not long ago, they were tearing up the streets of some of the richest stores in the country, that whole Michigan Ave. I mean, they were just rioting there and everything. And I'm just wondering, $500 million from a city that can't really afford it right now.
Well, Harris, you are anything but naive, first of all. And second, I would say the Obamas are reportedly billionaires now. So perhaps if they're not going to contribute to the center, maybe they will. Perhaps they can do something to contribute to the local communities. Listen, first of all, I do think a president should have a library. I go out every December to Simi Valley, to the Reagan Library. It's gorgeous.
Beautiful.
You get to see so much history. So I do think it's important for presidents to have these, and I'm not going to politicize that. He was a great president to part of the country, right? The rest of us, I've been pretty critical of his policies, but regardless of how I feel about his policies, he deserves this center. The question, I think, that you hit so nicely is who should pay for it. The Obamas themselves being billionaires, it's incumbent upon them to give back to this local community, not displace people. By the way, it's not just rent in Chicago, it's inflation, right? It's the cost of food and everything else that they can thank the Democratic president for and the Democratic leadership in Chicago.
Well, think about how fast the Obamas could, and I joked with crowdfund, kind of. I mean, they could throw a couple of events and boom, you got this.
Yeah,
right?
true.
Goodness. Chicago could make money on the deal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.